Hi, welcome to Platonics. I'm Jords,
I'm Rocky.
and each month we like to dig into an IP or a genre or some piece of fictional media, or not, and deconstruct that, boil it down into its individual components, and then reassemble them for play in an RPG session.
I love that you've left the option open for us to one day do non-fictional
Yeah,
content.
let's pick some historical things, maybe some, I don't know, antiquity or something.
So what are we going to turn into a gameable, vibes-loaded session this month, Jorts?
I'm glad you've brought this up because today's topic for discussion is the hyper-violent movie series for dog people, John Wick.
John Wick. He's one man. A
He is
one-man army.
basically the god of death.
He's got 2 arms and he's heavily armed.
He's got so many arms, but the arms, they're mostly used for killing people.
They're fire
Sometimes he does it
arms.
with his legs as well.
Fire legs.
High legs. There's a pretty cool scene where he's got his legs up against the wall, top-down camera shot, as he shoots a shotgun full of incendiary shells through a wall. Yeah, he's got fire legs.
That's what we would call fire legs, yep.
Absolutely. So John Wick, right? Humble beginnings. Just like, allow me to wax lyrical a little bit.
That's literally the show.
John Wick, the reluctant assassin, starts off so humble, just like the most relatable origin story, right? He's just living his life after his wife has died. He's got a dog that's supposed to anchor him to the world, keep him bought into living. And it all goes awry one day when a Russian gangster's son wants his car. John doesn't want to give it up. So the gangster's son comes to his house, steals his car, and kills his dog. So relatable, right? Just like super grounded, very mundane, like, oh yeah, obviously this is a revenge story.
Oh yeah, if
But-
someone killed my dog, I would be unstoppable.
If I wasn't the best assassin in the world already, I would become that.
Yep.
But then the movies go on and the world expands and we have this level of like not just power creep but full scope creep, right? There's a couple of cool world elements that are introduced in the first film that eventually usurp everything else until we get to the point where the entire world is assassins.
It starts as such a straight up revenge story. And it does, you're right, it unfolds into this just
like
incredibly baroque, intricate.
the scope is small and personal, and then
Yeah.
it becomes like world encompassing.
Yeah, it's definitely like they get very deep into their own world building. And like a lot of properties, I don't necessarily think it benefits from that.
I would agree. I think the first film is standalone. We've got this like really tight story that's just like, what if the best assassin came back?
Yeah.
And then we've got these like tiny little like glimpses into a deeper world. But the power is that a lot of it's behind the curtain. And then the curtain is pulled back in later films and it loses that level of mysticism.
Yeah. So I feel like what
And-
we've done here is started our session off by talking a little bit about what we think is actually not important to the vibe of John Wick, and it's not the world of what's the series called? The Continental?
Yeah.
Like, it's not
See-
the world of the Continental. That is not the thing that makes these movies special. That is not the vibe we are trying to replicate.
I think you can, but only as substrate. Like it is not the key element. It's just it provides some opportunities for MacGuffins and plot points to push the story along. But that's
Right.
not what the story's about.
Exactly. It's quite beautiful set dressing. You know, the
Yep.
coins are beautiful props.
Yep.
The hotel is a beautiful set. But
There
it's
are
not.
so many opulent places that the fights are set in. And it's like
Exactly.
we can put that up as a backdrop, that's fine. But in my mind, it kind of feels like, the really old school movies where you just had like the fabric backdrop that is on rotation. So it's like the car is stationary and the backdrop swings by. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, and that's what the, in quote marks, backstory is for. It is there to be a backdrop. And so as soon as you start like building out the backdrop more than you're focusing on what's happening in front of it, like that's, I think, when you have gone a little off the rails. And again, I think that's, to skip forward a little bit, probably a trap for new players or a trap for new GMs who are trying this thing. I think when the creators have gone out there and made 4 movies and a TV series and all this sort of supplementary material, our instinct as D&D conditioned game masters is to be like, well, I got to be across all the lore and I got to like dump as much lore as I can into the session because that's what'll make it feel like the game. And it's like, actually, we're here to tell you that is not the case.
Absolutely.
So, Jordan, what do you think? We've talked a little bit about what is not the key thing in John Wick. What do you think is the key thing to have in a John Wick anything?
I think John Wick's identity has to revolve around, the films are a singular individual, but obviously we'll be playing with a party at the table. A singular individual with a backstory that is murky, and they have like a very pointed goal, and their way of achieving that goal is with ultra violence.
Yep, I would agree with that. It's about one man on a mission, or woman or person. It's about one person on a mission. And as we said, in our case, one group of people on a mission. What kind of mission?
I think it's got to be revenge, right? Revenge
it's got to be revenge.
The most strong driver for this. So like
that is the response I was fishing for.
Pillar of a backstory has to be, how were you wronged and why did you come back?
Yep. It's really not about anything other than vengeance. And
we have like the most tangible driver is someone killed his dog.
And that is never going to be a thing that can be like fixed by violence or otherwise, right? Like no amount of...
There's no take backsies.
Exactly. He is unstoppable because the one thing that could stop him would be that his dog was alive and you can't give him that. And so he is just going to like kill his way through everybody responsible. Like, it's not a satisfiable condition, right? It's not a wrong that can be righted in the world. It is vengeance.
Yeah, not a hostage. And murder.
Yeah. He's not a hero on a mission to right some wrong. He is purely out to like hurt the people who hurt him. And I think in a culture that's kind of saturated with like, oh, the heroes have to be, quote unquote good guys. I think that's kind of refreshing. It's like, it's real cathartic to be like, no, you screwed me over and now I'm just going to like
end you.
Exactly. Who among us has not wanted to end someone?
I only want to end. I don't want to begin someone.
Okay, so it's about revenge.
We got a person. They're on a revenge mission. They cannot be satisfied.
Yeah.
I think we've also got another super important layer in this world. And I find this very interesting in that it's like an extreme binary is problems are solved either with power structures and oaths or killing. And there is no middle ground. Like negotiation just doesn't happen. The negotiation is about killing.
And even to a certain extent, like stealth doesn't happen.
Oh no, right? Stealth doesn't feature. Stealth is only there to give you an edge on the first gunshot as you start killing.
Like stealth is an untenable situation that it's a matter of when it will break out into combat, not if. Like you can't solve these problems by sneaking in, which makes sense because the problem is that the bad guys are alive and you want them to be dead, right? Like you can't solve that problem by sneaking past it.
And it's also a like, if I kill them all, there'll be no one left to come back for me.
Exactly. Like, once you start, you can't stop.
once you pop, John Wick edition.
It is though, right? Like once he starts down this path, it's like, well, I have to get everybody.
Oh, yeah. It literally escalates to like movie 4 where he's like, I'll kill the entire high table. I'll just do it. I'll kill all the assassins in the world. And you know that he could. Like that,
because
that
he's
built
the
him up.
best.
He's the god of death. He's Baba Yaga.
But I think you've accidentally kind of touched on another important point there, which is that you are kind of working your way up through the criminal org chart, right? Like you start at the bottom with the faceless mooks who didn't know what they were getting into, but like the end point of like, I am going to kill everybody who was involved is that you are killing everyone who is involved. And the way that you do that is you work your way up. So you start with the mooks and then you go to the sub bosses and then you end up killing the guy at the very top of the pyramid. Like that is the structure of the John Wick is like everyone dies and we kill from the bottom up.
I put this down as there's always a bigger fish, where it starts off with, got to kill the mob boss's son. All right, well, now you're back in the game and now you're being tasked to kill a member of the high table. Now you're going to kill a member of the high table and you're going to, oh no, now you're excommunicado. Now you got to go see the elder. Oh no, now you've been betrayed by the adjudicator, and it just continually escalates up until we get to, now there's a marquee. We just keep inventing titles that supersede the ones beforehand. There is always a bigger fish in this universe.
It's a pyramid made of smaller pyramids.
It's a Sierpinski's pyramid.
Yeah, actually that's a good visualization for it. It's a fractal pyramid.
So I was thinking about like, how would I bring that to the table? I'd probably just let my players invent that on the fly, where it's like, all right, think of a big dumb title, like, you know, Marquis, Duke, Prince, whatever. And it's just like, slap that on there. Now they're above the one that you just killed. Let's keep going.
Yeah, it kind of, it ends when you run out of screen time. Right, like
yes.
that's when the movie ends. Is like John Wick kills people for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and when you can't fit any more killing in, the movie is over, and whoever he killed last was the boss. Like, like that's it, you got him. Psych, and then there's a sequel. But
oh man, we love that. That's such a good way of describing it.
But like that could be the structure to go with, is that you kill up until like you look at your watch and like, and that's the session, like you've killed the last big guy.
I like that quite a bit.
And then they come back next movie and they've invented a new
bigger guy.
It's killing all the way up. It's not turtles all the way down. It's killing all the way up. There you go. That's the tagline for the episode. Not that we have taglines, but like, I feel like that's it in a nutshell, right?
Oh man, but I worked so hard on a hyper-violent genre for dog people.
We can work them both in. What else? What other ingredients do you think a John Wick experience needs? Whether it's a movie or a TV show or an RPG, what are the like pillars have we got?
There's a strong tension all the time between those existing power structures and personal bonds that often go against them. So like the rules is something that's a really big deal. And like the entire continental premise is based around it's consecrated ground, you can't kill on here. Sorry, you can't conduct business on here. Business implies laws, rules. There is a hierarchy, like there's social strata and you live within that place. But then you can go out on a limb and be like, oh yeah, we'll break some rules together and I'll make a blood bond with you that can be repaid at some point in the future. And then when that's called upon, people are like, oh, don't do this to me, John. I worked so hard to get to this point. Oh, but I've got to repay the blood bond, so I will. And it inevitably goes horribly awry for that person's life.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Having said like, oh, the actual details of the world building aren't important. The bit that is important to kind of extract from that whole morass is this like, it doesn't matter what the rules are, but there are rules. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what the institutions are, but there are institutions. And it also doesn't matter what, who the individuals are and what all their backstories are, but the relationships do matter. That, I think, is the other half of what makes it feel John Wicky, is like one half is the giga violence and the other half is like as you said, this network of interpersonal relations between John Wick and individuals, but also like the tension between that and some kind of institution.
Like even in the
but
films, that we don't know as the viewer what the rules are at any stage, and
No.
they just keep adding new ones on so that the plot can continue.
They keep adding new ones on, usually as he breaks them. No, not as he breaks them. Like one scene before he breaks them. So like they'll introduce a new rule in one scene, and then like the next scene is like, oh, well, if they introduce that last scene, we know that in the next scene John Wick's going to break that rule. Like
I do even love just like, okay, well, there's a blood bond. That's why he's got to do this thing. What's bigger than a blood bond? His quote unquote ticket. He needs to cash in his ticket. So like they just keep inventing these arbitrary currencies of relationship.
and rituals as well, yeah.
So many rituals, like rituals all the way down.
And so again, the details of the rituals don't matter, but they have
Nah.
to feel cool and weighty and symbolic. And I think Baroque is a good word.
Baroque is perfect, actually. I really like that as a descriptor because it's all old worldly stuff thrust into the
Exactly.
present. Like even the layers of technology that are displayed in there. It's like nobody's really walking around with smartphones. Everyone's got like a flip phone or
like a
an
pager.
ancient rotary dial.
And inevitably, anybody who does have modern technology is a bad guy and will be killed.
Don't like them. They got to die.
Okay, so what have we got? It's violence all the way up. We've got these Baroque rituals and power structures that can be
Institutions.
manipulated mostly to create tension and obligations. Like that's their purpose in the plot is they don't solve problems, they create them. We've got a character, a main character or main characters with a simple but compelling backstory that's kind of driving them all the way through. Is there anything else?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it.
One thing that I think we've kind of touched on a bunch of times, but I think it's worth stating explicitly, is the violence is the plot, right? Like the things that happen in between the violence are not the plot. The violence is the plot. If you're thinking about this as a video game, like the bits in between the fight scenes, the like beautifully choreographed practical effects, like lovingly rendered fight scenes, like the bits in between them where he's interacting with the Continental or whatever, like in a video game, those would be cutscenes, right?
I was thinking like in my mind, they're like graphic novel moments or like Fire Emblem type things where it's just like person shows up on one side of the screen with a little bit of text under them. And then you just press X to skip through those bits of dialogue. And then we're back into the hyperviolence.
Exactly. So that's why I think part of the reason why I think focusing on like the Continental and the
Intriguey kind of
assassin backstory is kind of missing the point because it's like, that stuff was only ever there to like pull him out of one fight scene and push him into the next one.
Yeah.
Like
It provides a constraint to make his violence more interesting than just man walks in a supermarket, kills everyone.
exactly. And to like provide an excuse for the next round of violence. So like I think whatever we end up designing, it can't be too dialed in on the lore and too dialed in on those pacty, oathy, ritualistic elements. Like whatever we're doing, the majority of it has to be about beautiful, gratuitous violence. It would actually be quite interesting, I think, and I'm not going to do this, but I think it would be quite interesting to look at a John Wick movie and just as a percentage, how much is fight scene and how much is not fight scene.
I was literally thinking about this on my rewatch and was like, the not fight scene bits are all the downbeats. Like anytime he's not killing is a downbeat just to give space so that when we start killing again, we have room to emotionally escalate once more. And I was like, what is the balance of that as this film progresses? And there are some moments where it goes on for like 20 minutes, but like the start of the third film, I noted down like we don't stop for 27 minutes. So like from the instant he walks on screen, 27 minutes until there is a pause in the violence.
I'm so glad that you counted that because that is exactly the kind of thing that I want to know. Because that's like what is like a 2-hour movie.
It's about a
that's
quarter
like
of the
a
film.
quarter of the film with no exposition other than what is like presumably like shouted or implied during the fight scenes.
Nah, you got it on the film before. That's all you get. You should have watched the film first if you wanted exposition. That's not what this is about.
But yeah, exactly. So the interstitial bits are important because they literally let you as the audience, I think, take a breath. You can't be at 110% for the whole movie. But
that's Rogue One problem.
They're not. Oh, see, I loved Rogue One, but we'll come back to that another episode. Yeah, you can't be at 11 for the whole movie. And so those downbeats are important, but they're small. I would be surprised if they were more than 20% of the film. Like, I reckon they're probably 80% violence by volume.
Yeah,
all right.
Look, I think that's a good summary. I think that's all the bits for what gives it its identity. Are we ready to jump into what we would do to make this realizable at the table?
Yeah.
Now, we've kind of already addressed this a little bit, but one of my first things is you've got to be in an interesting environment. The set dressing does have to exist. In those 27 minutes, I actually recorded. So this is from Parabellum, John Wick 3.
I love that you are bringing the data.
from the start.
Just imagining you sitting there on your couch with a clipboard and just marking.
You're not far off. My page of handwritten notes here. So I made a bit of a list of those first 27 minutes of film 3. We go through a library where he kills someone with a book. Then we'd go into an antique weapon store where there's a little scene of him assembling a gun together out of pieces of guns. And then there's just smashing windows and pulling out various types of blades that they're fighting with. Then he goes down into a horse stable, which is right next to the antique gun store, of course. And in the horse stable, he uses horse as gun, where he lines up the horse, slaps it on the rear, and then it punch kicks a dude in the face several times. And he does that more than once. Then he gets on the horse, and now we're out on the street, and he's racing the horse in a motorcycle car chase scenario there. And then we have a brief moment of respite after that. But those 4 environments are all uniquely evocative. So it's similar to what we discussed way back in our Westerns episode. If you can drop a couple of tidbits about this, or it's a standard enough environment that you can just let your players riff on what is assumed to be there. So I'm in a library. It's full of books and shelves. Those are my 2 elements that I'm going to fight with in here.
Yeah. I think the big ones for me when you're designing these spaces are you want to give people props that they can use. So things they can pick up and work with. But the other thing is you want to give them spaces, right? So you want to give them zones that they can move to, obviously movable spaces. So if you think about the 2 things that you would do in a scene as move and attack, which I don't think is unreasonable, you want to give them affordances for both of those in each of your sets. So you want to give them things that they can use in their attacks. I think you also want to give them spaces that they can move to. And some things could be in both. A chandelier that you swing from in the classic example, that's something you can drop on someone. It's also how you can move from one space to another. But the big one for me is when you drop these classic gridded maps down, which I absolutely don't think we're using, by the way. I think these are
wholly
sketches, if anything. But you drop these classic gridded maps down, and because of the mechanics of the system, there's no room for verticality. So I think that would be the thing I would make sure I was putting in the scene is make sure that there's a balcony on top, or a passageway underneath, or bookshelves that you can get on top of, right? Just some 3-dimensionality to the scene.
So I initially hadn't put down, but I thought mobility was an important thing. But I think you might be bringing me around to this. The verticality certainly exists in a lot of these shots. There's always somebody on a mezzanine or a staircase. God, in number 4, there's this nightclub that's got the big gangway in the middle and then sheeting water flowing off the sides of it. So of course, someone's going over that and the fight can continue in the pouring water.
Right. Everything's got to be a Chekhov's gun. Everything's got to be a Chekhov's everything.
Chekhov's
Like,
guns all the way down for killing all
Chekhov's
the way up.
I think another interesting thing you mentioned about that, like, what was it, 27-minute stretch, is that in having multiple sort of sets within a scene, like the violence itself has an arc. So, and that kind of reflects what I was saying before, like the combat is the plot. And that means you've kind of got to design your fight scenes in the way that you design the space, in the way that you like drop the enemies in there, have the enemies enter, have the players advance, whatever it is. You kind of got to design your fight scenes to have that structure too. So I think you want to be thinking about your fight scenes as having an arc, having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because we are going to be doing a lot of combat, and so you want to be telling the story through that combat, but you also don't want the combat to feel samey.
Yes.
Right? You want it to change texture part way through. I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before. The idea of, I got this from like a pasta podcast. This is the one where the guy designs his own pasta, but he's like, you want dynamic contrast.
We got some weird cross promotions.
You want dynamic contrast in the pasta. You want like some bits to be like nice and soft. You want other bits to be a little bit like hard and chewy. And this is what you want in your fight scenes, right? You want like some bits to be soft. You want some bits to be hard. You want some bits to be like very movement centric. You want some bits to be like hunkering down. Like you want the different parts of your one long fight scene to feel different, and ideally have, you know, a ramp up or a climax or an arc as well.
Really like scene 1, cramped environment. Okay, like pulling this straight from the film. Scene 1, library, cramped environment, like cluttered, busy in that way. Then scene 2, huge amounts of space and opportunity. We're in the antique weapons store. There's rooms upon rooms and glass cases everywhere. There's things that I can duck and hide behind. There's lots of opportunities to pick weapons up and use them. And then scene 3, we're on like motorcycles, and now there's heaps of space as we are transitioning from a location to another. There is a short journey in here before we get to the next scene. And like we do have like quite a big ramp up, ramp down. And then when things get just a little too much, we have a downbeat in there. There's a little bit of breathing space. I think it's also really important. The protagonists are so durable, just obscenely durable. They come through wounded and like physically changed, but their combat prowess never decreases.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite thing from the first movie. It's like John Wick comes out of the end and he's like almost more wound than man, but it does not seem to have affected his ability to fight at all. If anything, he's better.
The start of movie 3 begins with, this stab wound has nicked the artery. And he gets stitched back up and then does 2 more hours of violence. Like, I think we use our downbeats as opportunities for players to rest a moment and the characters to like pull out the nominal like first aid kit.
Yeah, patch themselves up to the point where it's not completely breaking the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, he slapped a med kit on that, like he'll be fine.
Yeah, he's got the anime bandage, the one that goes over the chest and around the waist. He's fine. But didn't he get shot in the head? Yeah, but the anime bandage solves that problem.
I think the flip side of that is the player characters are insanely durable. The bad guys are insanely not durable.
Brittle.
Like they go down in one shot, unless they're the boss man or a boss man of some kind. Like they go down in one shot. There are no called shots in this system. There are no like hit points in this system. There might not even be like you might not even care about rolling to hit in this system. Like. And again, I'm skipping ahead to the systems chat a little bit, but like the mooks, they're like Schrodinger's mooks, right? To be observed is to be killed.
It's a really rough existence when you imagine that every choice in their lives has led up to the moment that 30 of them walk in on John Wick and all of them die.
Yeah. And it's really just a matter of how, like they're there for him to exercise his will upon. Mm-hmm. So while we're talking about making things have some like interesting texture, do you want to talk about baddies? Because I feel like you could almost apply the same sort of thinking to them.
I definitely agree, right? Like the baddies themselves. There's sort of a substrate on which they're all built. Notably, none of them are snipers.
Interesting.
All of them are close gun people.
That's interesting. That's really interesting that you say that, because one of the things I was going to say is like, well, you know, in one scene you could like have a sniper.
I think that's like a missing element in the film. Like, I absolutely think it's something that should exist.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I would put in.
Everyone kind of comes at John and or his +1 in, I will run up and shoot my sidearm or shotgun, or even assault rifles. They close in really, really tight for assault rifles. I'm not a gun guy, right? I don't really know much about guns.
Yeah.
But I think you want to be slightly further away than the guy who's well known for his extreme martial prowess.
Yeah. But I think you can almost divide them up. Again, I don't know a lot about guns, but I think you can almost divide them up by like, the person doesn't matter. It's like, what type of gun? Are they shotgun baddie? Are they pistols baddie?
Exactly,
Are they
yep.
machine gun baddie?
Knife
Are they
baddie.
sniper rifle baddie? If you want to get real like intense, throw a bazooka baddie in there. Like
Just one, and that is like, the scene revolves around that one guy.
yeah,
He
he's
has
not
a
the
plot
he's not like
element.
the boss, but it's like, oh, the bazooka guy is in the same way that like in the gun shop, the scene revolves around like, what interesting things can you do with the props. In the scene with the guy with the bazooka, the scene revolves around like, every turn, say, the bazooka guy's gonna blow something up, and you gotta like hope that it's not gonna be you, until he's taken down, right? So like, in the same way that I think the sets bring a particular texture to your play, I think the baddies that you put in there are also a textural element. It's almost like the set is the chocolate, and then the baddies are like the nuts or the bits of like nougat or the bits of honeycomb, right? Like,
Yeah, we don't buy that straight up dairy milk anymore. We need some bits in there.
yeah, it's
And those
bits.
bits should be different guns.
Exactly. It's a chocolate bar, but instead of chocolate, it's highly destructible environments, and instead of bits, it's guns.
Importantly, there's Knife Guy, and Knife Guy counts for any weapon. Any physical weapon that you've got is a knife, right? Whether that's like a wakizashi or a katana or nunchucks, doesn't matter. It's Knife Guy. And on rare occasions, there's Unarmed Guy. And then you've got gun of various size and distance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of thinking about it. So none of them are harder to kill necessarily, but they all pose different sort of tactical challenges or narrative challenges for the players, right? Like Gun Guy still basically goes down in one hit, and so does Knife Guy.
It's not D&D 5e. Their hit points don't escalate with their challenge. They're
Right.
just as brittle. It's just now they have different gun.
Exactly. And because they have different gun, they pose different kind of threat. And provide a different type of crunchy texture to the scene. But like, yeah, I don't think there's...
Different type of honeycomb. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So we've got the things that we need to prep so far for this session are a bunch of actionable environments
Yep.
and a variety of bad guys that occupy different tactical space. I would also prep a couple of like for the downbeat sections, the punctuating scenes between the hyperviolence. I would prep some sort of like basic NPC interaction.
Yeah, something that taps into that like a Baroque ritualistic stuff we were talking about.
I really want that sort of element of mysticism in there where you share a brand with the person or they're like...
Yeah, I think our like between times is when those show up. I don't think we need our full web of intrigue, like
Absolutely not.
node-based
No.
thing. But I think what you can put in there is a like an extremely blatant clue that is like this is where you need to go next. We're not doing that like multiple different directions that things could point. It's not a mystery.
No.
It's like you get into the boss's office, you kill the boss. On his desk is an envelope which has the address of like the next place you need to go and kill everybody in, right? Like
Yep.
it's not...
Doesn't even need the address, right? It's just like it has a name on it and everybody knows where everyone is in this world.
Right. So it's like they're not clues in the sense that we would kind of talk about clues. It's just they're like
just
a pointer.
vectors.
And that's kind of when you can start bringing in that like, religious-esque sort of a flavory stuff, right? Is, oh yeah, you see that it's like sealed with the seal of this and like has a thumbprint in blood or whatever. Like
You find a rosary sitting next to it.
yeah. Like you don't even make the players roll for it. You're like, and you know that this means that like this boss is involved and you know where you need to find him.
Yep. You know all their hideouts and you know how to provoke a reaction to get to them.
Yeah. So yeah, I think prepping a little bit of stuff to go in those like bits between your fight scenes.
I'm going to extend it one little bit further as well. I'm not going to be doing a lot of the work on this front. I'll have the vectors that are pointing, but I won't necessarily have the significance of the characters, because I think one of the elements of John is that he never talks about himself. Everyone else tells you John's story. John doesn't go out there and be like, I was the best killer and I killed all these people and I had to get out, so I did these tasks and then I got out and I married my wife. None of that happens. Everyone's like, oh, John, you tried to get out of the game and you did it for love. And he goes, yeah. Like maybe 50% of Keanu's dialogue is just a really gravelly, yeah. So I think I would want to leave space here for the players. That's like maybe once per session, you have the flashback or like you procure the blood oath bond and like you tell us why this person's wrapped up in this and why they're trying to stop you here and how you push this scene forward.
I love that. So having it almost passing narrative control to the players to be like, okay, what is this player telling your character or telling the audience about your character in this dialogue? I really love that. The one exception I would put to that is I think whatever your game's equivalent of killing the dog is, I think you have to do that to them.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like you can't opt into a revenge story.
No,
like,
yes.
Whatever it is that is the inciting incident, you have to do that to the players, or rather, your bad guy has to do that to the players. Because if they go in and like choose the thing that they're getting revenge over, it's kind of self-inflicted. Like that has to be beyond their control, because that just gives them a little frisson of like wanting actual revenge.
Now, here's a thought, right? Because we didn't talk about like the very opening scene and what the characters are coming to the table are like. Is this something that you would ask them to like write their 3-sentence backstory, who they worked for, why they left, kind of a vibe, and then you're like, and this was your most prized thing, or and you did it to protect your daughter? That's a very common one. They're like a family tie.
It's a little more Taken, but like similar vibe.
But like straight up, Donnie Yen in the last one is just, oh yeah, they know my daughter and they threaten her, so I'll come back and I'll do heaps of violence to protect my daughter. His only motivation is protect daughter. He too is quite two-dimensional.
That's an interesting one. I don't know whether you should just tell them that they had, like you had
you just decide the thing and take it away from them.
Or if you ask them for like the 3 things that matter to you most and you pick one from each player to like kidnap, or you have
crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women.
Yeah, those are the 3 things that are opposed to me.
Sorry, that's a different episode.
Oh God, we are never doing Conan.
I recently rewatched them. Let's do Conan.
No, they're so bad.
They're so good.
They so don't hold up. Oh,
all right.
But we
back
digress.
to John Wick.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. I don't know if you like pick something for them to have taken, because that kind of misses the other side of it, which is that they have some kind of attachment to the thing.
These characters, like, dare I say it, they're pretty flimsy. They don't have a lot of depth to them. So I actually don't think there's a problem in being like, yeah, and I'm going to insert this element into your backstory. And you just have to glom onto that and build your character's motivation around it.
Yeah. Or like, I wonder if you give them something. Okay, maybe it's something like this. Maybe it's like, if we were doing a John Wick game, you are like, design a character who has a reason to be at the dog park, right? It's like, or you're all at a dinner party with your spouses and someone like takes your partner hostage, or like, you know, you find some conceit for them all to have. It's like, oh, you are all assassins and all of your kids happen to go to the same kindergarten. And then someone comes in and like kidnaps all of your kids, right? Like,
assassin kindergarten.
You give them something. This is how I think you do it. You give them a box, get them to fill it, and then in your opening scene, you take whatever they've put in that box. And it'll be something like, why are you at the kindergarten, right? Like, why are you here? Like, why are you at this wedding? I feel like a wedding's a good one. A little bit Godfathery. Why are you at this wedding? Who that you care about is at this wedding, right? And the players give you something that they care about that's at the wedding. And then in your opening scene, you like make sure you take each one of those things off them, you know? I feel like that's how you do it.
Straight up. And like, you don't have to worry about betraying the players. They know that this is coming. It's a John Wick game.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This is telegraphed in advance.
And I think that
now
has
we have an opening and inciting incident, and then like maybe a short follow-on scene of them getting their kid
gearing up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like John does the whole smash the concrete where I've laid the slab over the top of my guns and my coins.
Yeah. And because they're like, again, they're pretty flimsy sort of two-dimensional characters, they're going to have like our trademark weapon, and that's a good chance for everyone to like show you what their trademark weapon is. And like, my person has 2 pistols because 2 pistols, you know, or a trademark style, not necessarily weapon.
Yeah.
It's not about John's gun.
There's not a lot of gear porn in here. And it features on occasion where someone will rattle off the like, take this sidearm. It has X's and Y's, and it also does Z's. And you're like, cool. And then that gun lasts like 2 scenes, and then he's like, I'm fucking done with that. I'll just take the bad guy's gun.
So yeah, I think it's less about the gear and more about like introducing their fighting style. Yep. So like, if your guy is a brawler, they get out their like knuckle dusters. If your guy is a sniper, they get out a sniper rifle, and they're not going to have that sniper rifle for the whole game. They'll be picking up whatever happens, but it's the flip side of the character building moment is like, your first scene, you're narrating your like connection to the world. The second scene, you're like, and here is my fighting. Here is my violence style.
I would like to ask the players what's unique about their weapon as they pull it out, though, to be like, yeah, you pull out your knuckle dusters. What's engraved on them? Because there's going to be, there's some symbolism. There's laden with symbolism.
Yep.
You know, oh, you have a sniper rifle that you're like putting together. What's written on the barrel?
Yeah, or like what unusual material
what
is
trinket hangs from a chain?
Yeah.
Or, something like that.
But yeah, going back to that first scene, I think that hits the right combination of it is inviting the players to create something that they care about, and then giving them the like, in quote marks, violation of having that taken away without their consent. I think that's the combo that you want. So yeah, I think those are our first 2 scenes, is some kind of inciting incident and then a gear up scene. And I don't think you have to prep super much for these, but I do think you have to prime your players to prep for them. There is a little bit of homework for the players to come in and be ready for this. And it is those things. It is like, what is your reason to be in this opening scene? And then what is your fighting style? What is like a cool intro to who you are as an assassin?
Like, what's your visual identity?
Yeah. And then I think you can go straight into it.
Immediately jump into like the first violence. Yeah. And it's like, yep, we're going to cut this scene straight to...
You're outside the warehouse. Yeah.
Yep. And it's like, there are mooks on patrol, and we don't stealth past them. All the patrollers will be dead by the end of this scene.
Yep.
Right. So we've got 2 opening scenes. Then we've got like our actionable environments that we start laying down, textured with baddies of different gun or knife. I would prep a couple of like unique interactions that are based around like the lieutenants or the sub bosses along the way, where it's like, this is not just guy with gun, it's guy with gun and special ability. And like the full expectation is that they would last 5 to 10 minutes of play.
Yeah.
Whereas mooks are like of infinite supply and last seconds of play.
So here's my question. We've got this very easily repeatable structure of like textured, crunchy fight scene, little bit of thematically appropriate downtime. How many of those little like loops are you going to do? Because we could, almost like what I said when I was talking about the movie, is like the fighting keeps going until you hit 2 hours. Like, how many of these are we going to prep for before we hit the end?
I think you can be very flexible in this. I would like to have enough, like not probably written down, but like a generator. I'd have like my little table that I can roll on and throw some elements towards. I would have more than I consider necessary for a 3-hour game. And I would just keep spinning them up. Like, this is how I'm going to modulate the session timeline. So I'll be like, all right, we need another one. Now's a point where we should have a lull. I can see the players are flagging at the table, and I'll do it dynamically and be like, all right, you finish that one, and we progress to the next thing that's a pointer.
Yep. Yeah, this to me feels like one where you can be really dynamic as a game master. Because you're right. I think I would just prep a big stack of baddies, a big stack of interesting environments, and then really read the table and be like, okay, this table needs some downtime. Okay, they're getting a bit bored with the regular enemies. Let's chuck some like tactically interesting stuff in there. Read the table a bit more. All right, like look at the watch. It's getting late. Energy levels are like high. We want to end on a high, and I'm going to throw the boss fight in now.
Final scene starts now. Yep.
And you can kind of assemble the ride in front of the players a little bit. And I think this is one because it's such a neat cycle of fight scene, downtime, fight scene, downtime, fight scene, downtime. And there's like almost nothing else to it. I think this is a really good one if this is kind of a thing that you want to do as a GM. If you want to practice that, looking at your table, gauging what the players are ready for, and orchestrating the events at the table as a unit of entertainment, right? As an evening of fun rather than a game session sort of diegetically. Like, I think this is a really cool genre to do that in because you can just, like I said, you just kill enemies. John Wick kills enemies, and as many enemies as he kills in 2 hours is how many enemies he has to kill. And then it's the boss fight, and that's the end, right? Like, you can do the same thing with your game session. You have your opening scene. You know that everyone's got to be out of here by like 10 p.m. because it's a school night. So you kill enemies for 2.5 hours, and then you drop your boss fight, right? Like, I think this is a great one for doing that. Riding the waves of energy at the table, which makes you sound like a complete hippie. But
gotta ride those waves of energy, man.
I am a big fan of, like, you look around the table and people are distracted and on their phones, or if they're looking tired, it's like, okay, it's time to change things up. Is it time for like a break? Is it time to throw a different kind of challenge in? Is it time to like up the stakes and drop the boss battle on them, right? Like, it's a managing the mood and the vibe and reading the room at the table exercise.
Pure soft skills, baby.
Exactly. And this is the genre to do it in because you can just keep throwing stuff out.
There's even an example of this happening in the film where the last protracted fight scene is John Wick makes it to the staircase of 222 steps. But really, there's as many steps as the plot requires.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets to the top of the staircase, but there's still runtime left on the film. So he gets punted back down the staircase, and we see him rolling and rolling and rolling, and we do it again.
Yeah.
But this time for real. So that's the director looking at the film and being like, nah, I've got a couple more minutes left. I'm not ready to drop the final scene just yet.
Let's just run that last scene again. And right, that is totally a thing you could do at your table if you can tell that your players are up for it. If your players are having like a sick time, you're like, and they punt you back down the stairs and like, we're going to run it all again because we are just having a blast. But like, I wouldn't drop that on them if you look around and it's like, okay, this table is like ready to wrap things up, you know?
So yeah, don't think we need to prep this in advance. You just need the locations and an inkling of what's fun about them. Like, I'm a big fan of turning this into a little Spark table where it's like, name of location, 3 words. And those 3 words encapsulate the vibe and the bits and what I expect the players to do here.
Your prep for this kind of game as a game master is about, I think appropriately, giving yourself the ammo. Like, that's all you want to walk in with. You want to walk in with like fully loaded clips full of like bad guys in one gun and fun scenes in the other, and just like let loose on the players, you know, and let them kind of deal with it. Are you done for prep?
Cool. I think I'm ready. I think we've got everything.
So you hinted that you maybe have some thoughts on systems for this. Are you ready to dive into systems?
I do. I have 2 that immediately jump to mind. I think there's actually a third. It's just that I've never played it. But the first one is one that I played quite recently. And I think it fits this vibe to a T. It's Eat the Reich by Rowan Rook and Deckard.
Interesting choice.
So in this game, you play a crack squad of vampires who are dropped into Paris to do a location crawl, murdering all the Nazis you encounter on your way to drink all of Hitler's blood. And I think it satisfies a lot of the vibes of what we're going for. So the dice pool system is super easy. It's very fast. The abilities encourage you to just like smash through all of your gear. Gear has limited uses. So if you've got a pistol, it might have 6 uses in it. Each one gives you an extra dice in your pool. And the last one gives you double the bonus to encourage you to get to the end of that and then pick up gear from people you've killed and carry on. There are infinite mooks. There's a couple different like flavors of mook. It feels very cinematic, and it carries off that same, like, if you can make an excuse to use something in the environment to your advantage, you get an extra dice. Absolutely. Let's go.
Yep. Yeah.
What were you vibing?
I have never run this system, but it feels like it would be perfect. And I'm wondering if it's one of your choices as well. I would take a look at Wushu.
That was it. That was the one. Wushu is the other one that feels like it is literally made to evoke this vibe.
Yeah. So the thing that I love most about it, I'll link to the rules in the show notes because it's all free online. But the thing that I love most about this is that it is a game where, from the rulebook, in short, a bunch of creative types with violent tendencies are trying to one-up each other with quick bursts of action movie imagery, which I feel like is just perfect. So it does a couple of things that I really like. Again, I haven't played it. This is just based off reading the rules. I have no idea how this would play out. A couple of things I really like. The first one is that, as we were kind of talking about, it's kind of just assumed that whatever you do works, and the dice kind of determine how the scene flows next to give it a bit of variability. But if you say, I shoot the guy in the head, you shoot the guy in the head. Like, it's done. The dice then determine sort of the consequences of that and set up your like next set of problems. The other thing I really, really like is that you get dice for details. So every time you narrate a detail into the scene, whether that's an element of your own character or an element from the scene, or whether you just like straight up make something up, you get to add a dice to the dice pool. And then that sort of helps determine, again, when you roll all of those, it helps determine like how things go in the next part of the scene.
And all really of this encourages engaging with the props.
Exactly. It's like play with the toys, narrate the action in a like a novel way each time, like really get into the gory like violence of the scene. And yeah, I just love the idea of like every time you mention like an interesting, fun detail in what you use or like how you do it, you get to like drop another dice in the bowl, and then you kind of roll them all at the end once everyone's done narrating. I just think that is kind of a perfect flow for how you want this game to go. And I think that is really going to help players who are new to this kind of role play figure out what they need to do to get dice.
I have played Wushu once, and it is so damn good at bringing players into the create the fiction mindset. Because like the reward is perfectly aligned with the type of genre you want to tell. And like, as it takes no time at all for players to grok that I just have to build the scene. I just have to say that I do cool shit. Like, have you ever had it when you've introduced a new player to D&D where, you know, they're a fighter and they're getting close and they're like, oh, I want to take the guy's weapon. And you're like, oh, that's a bit of a hard one. That's kind of a protected niche of like a subclass. So, whereas in this one, absolutely, you take the guy's weapon and you stab him with it, or you shoot them with it, or you do, you know, whatever you want. Describe to me these details and I will reward you.
Exactly. You don't even need to ask if you can take the guy's weapon. You say,
yeah,
I take the guy's weapon, and it has happened.
The scene evolves because the players just dictate it. And that is a behavior that carries between games. Like, once you've been exposed to this, it's really easy to shift your style of play to be like, hold on, I can just make moves. I don't have to wait for permission.
Yeah, I think my first pick for this would be Wushu. Did you have another pick?
I did. And this is a game that I haven't played, but the reputation precedes it. And it's Feng Shui. So Feng Shui is also made for that. I think the perfect comment I saw that described it was, you're all a bunch of teenagers watching a Michael Bay film. It's like, it is all big action. And like, it's off chops, explosions going off, and you're all ducking and weaving as you like progress through quite violent scenes. I think that one would fit well, but you know, I don't have the expertise in it to truly say.
This may be the first episode you've not recommended Blades in the Dark.
Look, I thought about making a joke about it. In Blades, you're mostly normal people, but you're a cut above others. In this one, you're basically gods. You know, you walk through a scene where 10,000 bullets are fired and one of them hits you. Yeah. And that scratches you.
Yeah.
It's just not quite the same vibe.
While we're talking about systems that it wouldn't work in.
Perfect segue.
Thank you.
How would you run this in 5e?
Weirdly, I actually think you probably could. I just
reduce everyone to 1 hit point.
Yeah, I think you'd have to go heavy on the minions and like light on the interpretation of a lot of the rules as written. Like,
you would have to massively hack the game.
I don't even think hacking is the word for it. You just have to ignore big chunks of the game.
Yeah, that's fair. You have to hack parts off the game.
Exactly. If you can get it to the point where you are reducing things to a single roll to hit, I think that's probably the point you need to be at. Like,
crucially, massively simplifying movement in the space. I don't care about your distinction between 25 feet and 30 feet. Like,
yeah, just
not far.
Switching all the way over to zone-based movement. So I think some people do play D&D like this. If you had a game master and players who are willing to like unclench enough to just like not use the rules when it doesn't feel dramatically appropriate, I think you could actually have a lot of fun doing this in D&D if that's what everyone was familiar with. Mm-hmm. It just wouldn't be my first choice.
It wouldn't be my first, second. I don't know. I think I'd have like double digits before we'd get to 5e. I think it'd be really bad at evoking this type of combat.
Again, I feel like this is one of those genres where actually the structure of the story is more important than the rules. And if the rules that everybody knew were D&D and they didn't want to learn new ones, I would delete 90% of D&D and we'd just roll with it. And if you had a group of players who were also willing to roll with it, I think you could have a similar amount of fun. But I agree. It's one where most of the rules in D&D get in the way rather than helping.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Would you run this?
I feel like I sort of already have, but I'd definitely do it again. It is like not emotionally, creatively exhausting when you get to the end of one of these sessions and you're like, I've been thinking up so many details on how to interact with this environment all session long. Whew. That when you actually kill the bad guy, it is genuinely cathartic.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know if this would be my everyday game. I feel like I would want to be well rested before I ran it. But yeah, I'd run this once, even purely as an exercise in very on the fly improvisation or reading the table game mastering.
I think this would be a great one if your players are the adaptable type. It's oh no, 2 players can't make the session tomorrow. Hey, you guys want to play a John Wick game?
Yeah. And even, I'd go a step further. Even if your players aren't the adaptable type, I think this is the kind of play that teaches your players to be more creative and interesting players. And it's the kind of play that teaches you to be a more creative and interesting game master.
I remember my first time running a game like this, and I was not very good at putting in those actionable elements. And this is a direct response to the deficit where I'd be like, yeah, you guys are in the building and a bunch of bad guys come at you. And they're like,
what else is in the building?
What? Yeah, okay. What else is in any of these scenes? And you're like,
but that,
it's a howling wasteland of emptiness.
But that only lasts one scene, right?
Yep.
You very quickly see that that's not going to work for the rest of the game.
Very fast to react, yeah.
Cool.
That's John Wick. We did hyperviolence and
that's John Wick. This has been Playtonics. You can find more of this if you enjoyed the show at playtonics.net. That's playtonics.net. And also wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a player, send this one to your game master and say, pretty please, can we play some John Wick flavored wushu? If you're a game master, run some John Wick flavored wushu and then tell your game master friends, send the episode to them as well. I think that's just about all we've got for this week. I have been Rocky.
This month, even. And I've been Jordan.
Far out. This month, every month.
You made it all the way to the end.
Made it all the way to the end. We will catch you next month.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to WUXIA Radio.